Meeting with a salute to the flag. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Do we have a roll call?
Chairman Rosen.
Yep.
Mr. Mance. Mr. Rosinski.
Here.
Mr. Abbey.
Here.
We have three present, Mr. Chairman.
Constitutes a quorum, we can do business. Okay, and the sunshine law statement, please.
This meeting today conforms with Chapter 231, Public Law 1975, called the Open Public Meetings Act, and as per the requirement of the statute, the notification of the meeting was published in the Star Ledger, in the Home News, and filed with the clerk of Middlesex County.
Thank you. Next on our agenda is correspondence. I would call everyone's attention to the foods report, and particularly since we're being recorded tonight graphically, I'd like to point out that over 75 tons of food were distributed by McFoods, which I think is a pretty remarkable thing. And there's a good deal more information which is contained in their monthly report. Next, we have committee reports. The first one is our financial report. Everyone has a copy. Do I have a motion to receive and file?
I'll make a motion.
Second. Moved and seconded. All in favor? Aye. Motion carries. Next, Mr. Windus, our recycling report.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Throughout May, our curbside collection program took in 2,194 tons of material from our 16 participating towns, and that's an increase of 37% over the same time period last year. But we have to remember that we took in 2 new towns since that time, Milltown in September and South Plainfield this past May 1st. In addition to South Plainfield, 7,300 new homes now in the program, 6 new units were added to the program also in May due to new home construction. So the total amount of homes and businesses that the program is now servicing is 100,082 homes and businesses. And on the yard waste throughout the month, 3,166 tons of combined weeds, brush, and grass were recycled. 44% of that amount being brush and tree parts, 38% grass, and 18% leaves. That is all I have.
Good. Thank you. We're expanding all the time.
16 towns.
Yeah. Good service. Thank you. Next is our golf report. Ralph, do you want to comment on that?
The numbers are for May are slightly down, but May, when checking with the golf courses in the area, the numbers for May have been lower because of the wet weather and cold weather in May. One of the things I wanted to bring to the attention of the board is that now that we have an ad out there, and we have we joined Facebook as a page that people can contact. We're concentrating on finding other ways of getting golfers into the golf courses. And one of the things we're looking at with our booking company is to allow golfers that are not registered, non-registered golfers, to be able to make a tee time. The registered golfers will still be able to make a tee time 7 days in advance. The non-registered golfers will be able to make a tee time 2 days later to give the registered golfers a slight advantage. That's one of the things we're looking at, and we're also looking at third-party booking companies that will get the word out about our golf courses that are getting in better condition as we speak. They are getting much more acceptable.
Thanks.
Mr. Chairman, as a matter of fact, I just want to pass on a compliment that I got from a number of people that played in one of the outings, I think that had the Police Chiefs Association. They complimented the course as being much better than they remember it, and they see a lot of positive movement. I just thought you would want to know that. That was from individuals that I just met, didn't have a relationship with that all, but
unsolicited.
unsolicited. And the other thing is you have two resolutions on tonight associated with the Meadows Golf Course. One is for the golf cart paths, and the other is for the construction administration associated with it. And to give you a status update on Reese Jones has submitted a preliminary draft of their master plan. It's being reviewed by Ralph Ian and Mr. Polos, and then we'll report back to you further after we determine exactly what the recommendations are.
Good, thank you. Next on our agenda is the finance report. Everyone has a copy. Have a motion to receive and file.
Motion.
Second.
Right, at this point, we do not have an economic development report tonight. I'm sure next time. Next on our agenda is a TEFRA hearing, which I would ask Mr. Pinella to conduct.
Sure. Well, perhaps before we open up the hearing, I'll just give the commissioners a brief update. I know that Chris Palladino, the longtime head of DevCo, had come to your last meeting, I believe, and given you an explanation of this redevelopment project that is being undertaken in New Brunswick. And in connection with the financing of the project, which has many pieces to it, the Middlesex County Improvement Authority will be undertaking two bond financings that will pay for certain portions of the project. One piece of the project entails the construction of an approximate 207 unit low-income residential tower, which is the very top of the multi-use facility. That financing is actually a private loan from Citibank directly to the redeveloper. So it's not a public bond issuance where there are hundreds of nameless, faceless public bondholders that need to be protected traditionally by a bond trustee under a master bond resolution. This loan has one bondholder, Citibank, and one borrower. And Citibank, as the lender, will enter into loan documentation and mortgage documentation directly with the borrower. So in this financing structure, I assure you that Citibank's form financing documentation that it's going to require that we use will not be imposing upon the authority or any of its bond trustees any remedial activities in the event that the borrower were to default on the loan, because Citibank views this as their own direct loan, and in the event that the borrower was ever to fail to pay, Citibank will directly control all the remedies with respect to the borrower. So having said that, the obvious question is, why then is it that the Middlesex County Improvement Authority would be even involved in the issuance of this bond from Citibank directly into the lender? There's one reason and one reason only. Because this particular loan, which is for low and moderate income housing that meets the requirements of the Internal Revenue Code, qualifies for a certain type of tax exemption on the interest rate. The only way to achieve that interest rate is for a public entity to be the bond issuer. So absent that, this particular loan, which is a 100%, can't emphasize this enough, a 100% private loan from a private bank directly to a developer would never be here. It's only here because we need for the authority to act as the conduit bond issuer so that the borrower is able to achieve a tax-exempt interest rate on the loan. In essence, for those of you who are familiar with New Jersey Economic Development Authority, it's commonly considered to be what's called a conduit bond issuer. It enables lenders and borrowers who otherwise would qualify for a tax exemption on the interest rate on the loan to be processed through the EDA to achieve that. Same concept here. The MCIA is a conduit bond issuer on this loan. So that's what this particular loan is about, and that's what this hearing that we will open up in a moment is about. This type of bond is called an exempt facility private activity bond. When municipalities, boards of education, county governments, and essentially every prior MCIA bond financing that's ever been done where it's a governmental purpose bond, you're not required to have these public hearings. But when it's what's called a exempt facility private activity bond, where the user of the facility is a private entity and they're being afforded a tax exempt interest rate, under the Internal Revenue Code, you're required to conduct a public hearing to see if there's any member of the public who would want to ask a question about the financing or the project itself, and there are notice requirements that the issuer of the bonds must comply with, which, as your special bond counsel for this financing, we did. We noticed this public hearing in a timely fashion in the Home News Tribune for tonight at this time. So what we'll do now is we'll formally open up it's called a TEFRA hearing under the code. We will formally open up this public hearing, and to the extent there are any members of the public that would either desire to make a statement about the project, a statement about the financing, or ask any questions about the project or the financing, you would answer those questions through me. So we're going to open up the hearing now, and if anyone has a question that's in the public, we're happy to have any discussion on it.
The hearing is now open. Is there anyone who wishes to speak? Hearing and seeing no one, I would close the hearing.
You can close the hearing.
That's good.
So that's done.
That's done. Okay. So, just a quick review, the MCIA has no financial obligation under this. We're strictly a conduit enabling what is federal policy.
Yes.
And we implement it
For-
to serve the needs of low-income housing.
Yes. For example, when you undertake your annual equipment and capital improvement program that Mr. Capizzi will be doing for you, in that instance, the borrowers actually pay their loan and lease payments to your bond trustee, and then the bond trustee administers those payments to the bondholders through the electronic securities depository.
Yep.
With respect to this private loan, the loan repayments from the developer will not even pass through you. Citibank doesn't see any need for the money to flow through you. They're treating it like a direct loan from them. So the developer will actually make the loan repayments directly to the lender.
Thank you. Okay. Returning to our agenda. Prepared to take up our resolutions. We have two resolutions, 7A and 7B, which we will be acting on first and then go on to the others. Do you want
Yes.
to discuss this?
We will. Number 7A is, we did an additional procurement to qualify underwriters for the authority and add to the list of qualified underwriters. Item B is awarding and memorializing our contract with Lentz Goldman and Spitzer for special bond counsel services for the New Brunswick community cultural community center project that Mr. Miller has just been describing. Mr. Chairman, do you want to continue to go through all of the other resolutions,
like
or would
to
you like to vote on
I'd like
these
to
two?
Vote on those two. Would be nice.
I would
It's
ask
clear.
that we do that. We can vote on them together, kind of as a consent agenda, if that's okay, unless somebody wants to vote on separately. So do you want to do those at, do you want to do the? at
I'd
this
like to
time,
do
or
them now.
We'll do them now, so we need a motion then to.
I'll make a motion. Motion to approve resolution 7A and 7B. Did I hear a second? Yes. Moved and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Now we'll go on to 8A.
The first is a resolution extending our contract for yard waste and recycling with Nature's Choice through August 31st, 2018. You earlier went through a procurement that allowed you to extend it for that purpose, and based upon the service and the price, the recommendation is to extend it now through August of 2018. Next is a resolution approving the Educational Services Commission project and providing our consent to the New View Academy Annex building funding. Next is directing an application, 8C is directing an application to be made to the local finance board for that funding. AD is authorizes amendments to our contract with the ESC. And J, vendors, we're extending some contract, some vendor contract dates which are about to expire and can now be extended. AE authorizes our payment to the Middlesex County Insurance Commission for our annual assessment. This is your property and casualty, essentially, premium payment. On 8F is authorizing an amendment to the approved list of state vendors. Once again, this is amending contract expiration dates. 8G authorizes state vendor contracts for state approved vendors list for the Roosevelt Care Center facilities. 8H approves the proposal to award contract for the annual cost report, which is necessary for our Medicaid and Medicare billing and accounting services. 8I is the approval of a supplementary pharmacy contract for Roosevelt Care Center to Divine Pharmacy. They are essentially our backup pharmacy.
Yes, that's right.
8J authorizes a contract with Wounded Care Supplies for the RCC facilities to advance tissue. 8K awards a contract for temporary nursing personnel for the RCC facility. That's a matter we've talked about, I guess, at another time.
Yeah, that's been reviewed, of course, by both our administrators and their representatives.
The next series of resolutions deal with the two financings that we've been talking about today, and we have Mr. Pennell and Mr. Capizzi here in case anybody has a question.
Mr. Capizzi, would you like to comment on what we're acting on?
Yes, what you're being asked to consider is a bond resolution authorizing the issuance of county guaranteed capital equipment and improvement revenue bonds. This is an ongoing and annual financing program of the authority. The authority appeared before the local finance board earlier this morning. They voted to issue positive findings in support of this project. So the bond resolution authorizes the bond. The next resolution, therefore, sets the amount of bonds to be issued not to exceed 15 million and authorizes certain officers of the authority to execute certain documents and to carry forward the financing.
Thank you. So item 8L is the resolution authorizing the issuance of county guaranteed capital equipment and improvement bonds. 8M authorizes certain action to be taken in furtherance of those bonds. 8N and 8O are the two resolutions that are required for the Brunswick Cultural Center project as previously described by Mr. Pennell. 8P and 8Q are the two resolutions described by Mr. Samuels. First for the car path improvements himself, and the second for the construction administration for that project.
Okay, David, do you have any other comments you want to make about those?
No.
Good, thank you. Okay. Thanks, Lou.
Welcome.
Next is old business. Under our, I don't have any old business.
We have golf course improvements.
Those are the two that Mr. Samuels described.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's
all right.
yeah, that was.
That's the cart paths and the construction
That
administration.
one out from
Okay.
and as I've been told, the price we got was a favorable price.
The price that you received was very favorable. In fact, it was so favorable, I was very concerned about it because it was rather low. But we checked out the qualifications, and the low bidder had references from Westfield and from Monmouth County that we contacted, and he performed satisfactory to those clients. So accordingly, we have recommended.
You have to be careful. There's a Yiddish expression that translates, if the bride is too pretty, check the marriage.
That we checked out the references. They haven't done a lot of
Strike that
public
from
work.
the minute.
They haven't done a lot of public work before, but they've done work for Westfield, for Monmouth County, and they've done some private work. And we were concerned, that's why we made all the phone calls.
No, glad you vetted it. That's good. Thank you. Having no old business, we'll move on to new business. And on the new business, we have the minutes of our May 10th meeting. Everyone has a copy, to have a motion.
I'll make a motion.
Second. Moved and seconded, all in favor? Aye, motion carries. Next, we open the meeting to the public. Is there anyone in the public that wishes to speak? Seeing no one, we'll close the public portion and move on to action on our resolutions.
I believe we need a motion to approve.
Yeah. You want to frame the motion?
Yes. We need a motion to approve our resolutions, items 8A through 8Q.
I'll make a motion.
Second. Moved and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion carries. Next, we have to pay the bills. Everyone has a copy of the bill list. Have a motion to pay the bills.
Motion. Second.
Moved and seconded, all in favor? Aye, motion carries. We return again to a public portion. Anyone who wishes, yes, sir.
Joe Gash. I have a question on Alban Air Consulting.
Okay.
It appears from last meeting, the consultant is supposed to provide 90 hours on average, but there's no accounting that is operable for that. How is that tracked?
Well, from my point of view, my brother commissioners may not agree, but Mr. Albanier is a professional of long standing. If he says to me that he's putting in the appropriate amount of time, that's sufficient for me, and I would accept it. And I think he's been flexible with his time and used it well. We made good progress in a lot of areas. So, based on performance and our knowledge of him as a man of strong reputation, I have no quarrel with his time out, his hours.
And Mr. Chairman, in addition, of course, he works substantially out of this building and out of the various golf courses, and he is he's a direct report to the executive director,
That's right.
who works with him, and as do I, on a day-to-day basis on all of the county golf projects, and Mr. Samuels is our consulting engineer.
And Mr. Chairman, there's many times where Mr. Albanier has to meet with us in our office to go over Tamarack and the Meadows and the plans for those, as well as I've met with him out in the field. We've ridden the course a number of times, so even though he may not be here in the office, I know that I have spent a number of hours with him.
Mr. Job, any other questions?
Well, that's all well, then why do you require billing hours from all your other people if you trust Mr. Alban so much?
Because there's all of the rest billed by the hour, and this is no different than we have a contract that requires us that you have a substantial amount of time. I bill in 0.1 increments because I get paid in 0.1 increments. There isn't a flat rate that's paid to me. This is a flat rate. So the executive director keeps track of his time. He supervises him, as does the chairman, and we all work with him on a day-to-day basis.
But to be transparent, there's no log that says he's provided that amount of time to the improvement authority, right?
I'm not sure this is not a cross-examination, but the answer is that the contract doesn't require that. I think we're satisfied. It says he's to work 90 hours on an average. There isn't a requirement that there's a log.
It does say 90 hours,
It does,
right?
but it doesn't have a requirement that there's a log. That's correct.
So there's no accountability for the 90 hours,
By your own
somebody's good
We
work.
just explained to you the accountability, so I don't think we really have to answer that question yet.
Why do employees have to submit timesheets then?
That was the basis on which they were hired.
So the 90 hours really isn't a basis?
It is a basis. We're explaining that requirement in terms of our experience and the experience of the executive director, the engineer spoke, and our attorney spoke. We think that Mr. Albanier is doing the job he was hired for. And if he puts in 80 hours one month and 110 the next month, and maybe even more, we're not monitoring that in a strict sense.
But you don't know if it's true.
He has responsibilities which he is fulfilling. And as a chairman, and I've sat in this chair for more years than I want to count, I'm very comfortable with Mr. Albanier's performance. And I think that, and I have, I have enough business experience to know when somebody's performing and when they're not.
Can you tell me why his consulting service is considered an EUS?
That's something I can't answer. What is an EUS? An exempt, meaning exempt from,
It's exempt from bidding.
right? Well, I think you probably can answer that question as well as anyone in the room, based on your own experience.
At the time, I couldn't answer ask and answer the question, so I'm asking now.
Okay. Well, as I understand it, the law permits that kind of hire for for services such as he has provided.
Which again, why isn't that qualified, or why isn't that service bid? What does he have that's unspecifiable?
Well, I don't know if I would define it quite that way, but clearly our council feels that that kind of an agreement is appropriate and within the law.
There doesn't appear to be an EUS form for this year's contract.
We'll take a look at that.
Then to the general counsel again.
Yes, sir.
I'm not clear on how a sole individual can be qualified. And then the individuals that are providing the service haven't submitted any qualifications at the time the Improvement Authority requested them.
So, as I explained earlier, and this is maybe the third time you've asked this question in public, you qualify a firm. So you qualified Valence for every year for the last 19 years, and Daria Venetia firm every year for the last 19 years. And if she added or subtracted orders during the course of the year, it didn't alter the fact that she was qualified. So that's the basis of it. The fact that Mr. Coughlin's firm added myself and Ms. Berlin and Mr. Mancello, he was qualified. We are all qualified, but in any event, it's just a change in personnel in the firm. Didn't change the qualifications.
You mentioned that they qualified a firm.
And
But
just so you know, before
Can I
the
finish?
resolution qualifying was done, they qualified all of us. Those were all submitted before the qualification.
When the qualifications were submitted, if I'm not mistaken, Coughlin submitted qualifications solely for Coughlin.
Correct. You're incorrect. You're incorrect. Prior to the qualification vote, all of our qualifications were submitted. The night that the board qualified us, they had submitted to them. Prior to that, all of the qualifications for all. Mr. Coughlin supplemented his submission to include the names of all of the attorneys in his firm. So you're incorrect.
But at the time he submitted qualifications,
I
At
answered
the
the
time-
question once already, so I'm gonna answer it again so that you understand it. He submitted it and then subsequently added the names of all of the other attorneys who had subsequently joined him. So the answer is, when the board voted to qualify him, we were all associated with him. And the board had all of that information and all of our resumes and all of our qualifications and all of our experience before them when they voted to qualify.
that's not what I asked.
Well, yes, it is what you asked.
No, I asked when qualifications were submitted and due, that individual provided qualifications as a sole member.
And then subsequently supplemented it, yes.
You
Before
can-
the board voted, correct.
So all the other people who were submitted qualifications could have had the opportunity
Sure,
to amend their
If
qualifications?
a law firm had added, between the time that they originally submitted and added new attorneys and wanted to submit more information, of course they could have.
But did they all know that they could do that?
It's done all the time. Whether they knew whether they could do it or not, I can't get into their mind, but the answer is that that's actually just helpful to the authority. Just provides them more information.
But it appears that the only reason it was done was to bring two people in through the back door.
No, that's not true, because it was
Okay.
done publicly, and it was submitted to the authority publicly. It's nothing backdoor about it. It was a letter to the chairman and the executive director. I don't quite understand the reference to the backdoor.
Well, if it was done publicly, usually the authority goes out and says, we're soliciting for more qualifications, or there's supplemental information requested. But that wasn't publicly
you're
posted,
wrong.
right?
This was just additional information that was submitted that the authority had at the time it acted. So it had all of the information before it, at the time it acted. And I am unaware of the authority. I've never seen publicly a discussion, for instance, I hate to keep singling out Mr. Pinella, but he's probably got 150 lawyers in his firm. I'm pretty sure at the public meeting, we don't read the roll of all of the attorneys that are at the Rolaine's firm. But if he added some lawyers and their qualifications might be material to a consideration that the authority was taking, he might say, oh, by the way, these 2 lawyers have joined me since I submitted. And that's what Mr. Coughlin did.
And with all due respect to the Willens firm, when the Willens firm submits their qualifications, they give a pedigree of a dozen and more attorneys that are going to be offering service to the improvement authority, different than the way Coughlin did. So the Willens firm does.
He actually did before the pedigree of all of the attorneys. Actually, we gave the pedigree of all of the attorneys that were in the firm. So you got every one of them, not just a select number of them, but the board had before them the experience and resumes of all of the attorneys.
So is there any reason why Raynone didn't submit qualifications when they were due?
Because I joined Mr. Coughlin after his initial submission, and he deemed it appropriate to supplement it with my qualifications.
Can I ask a question about the bill list?
Sorry,
Can I ask a question about the bill list?
the bill list, sure.
How much was Raynone paid?
Me personally? Because I don't personally get paid, you mean the firm?
Yeah. Raynone, Coughlin,
Appears the total is $23,282.61.
only one check?
No, I think that's a total of a number of checks.
So the total for the month is 22,000.
That's what it looks like to me.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else that wishes to speak? Seeing no one, we'll close the public portion. And unless anyone else has any comments, we'll accept the motion from the chairman. Motion. Second. Moved and seconded, all in favor? Motion carries. We stand adjourned.